I feel like. Welcome back to the Tiny Titans podcast. I'm Katie. My husband Doug is joining me today for part 2 of Cassidy's story. And today's prop, we've brought her baby book that my sister-in-law Lexi made for us from when she was in the NICU, because part 1 of the story, if you want to go back and read it, if you want to go back and listen to it, is pre-pregnancy and her birth story. So she was born at 5 pounds, 6 ounces. And how long was she? I have to look at the book. 19 inches long at 9:54 p.m. on October 1st, 2017. And this book that we're looking at, Doug's looking at it right now. Lexi did a great job of taking a ton of screenshots of text messages. So we have like a bunch of conversations that were had with people while we're driving down the highway, like on the interstate, on the way to Chicago, after we had gotten there, and things like that. So, also I want to remind everyone, our NICU stay with Cassidy was in Chicago at Comer's. So we live 2 hours south of there. And so it was not an easy thing to be where we were with her. It was not just right down the road from the house or the hospital around the corner. So she was in the NICU for a total of 21 days. Yeah. So she's tiny, right?
Yeah, so I was just going through looking at the pictures, and one thing we were always confused of when we were in the NICU was like, oh, she's the big baby.
Oh yeah, she was called the big baby. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she was a big baby. She was early. All our babies, for their sizes, gestational ages, have been big, even though our smallest was born at 1.7 pounds.
Yes.
For gestational age was still larger than they expected.
2 weeks ahead.
Yeah.
Because they were asking if she was 24. All of them were 2 weeks ahead.
You grow big babies that you can't hold on to.
That's true. I'm a very short person, though. I'm a very small woman. My torso is barely there. So all the babies go right out in front. And a lot of it also we've discovered since the beginning of having babies is that my cervix is weak. That muscle is weak. So,
it was on our last one that they found out. They're like, yep, I think they called it an incompetent cervix.
Yeah, that's the problem. So, okay. So,
well, looking at the picture, she's on a high flow nasal cannula.
Right?
Yep, started out on a high flow nasal cannula.
Oh, also, hold on, rewind. So she was blue when they pulled her out from the C-section,
mm-hmm.
and then they had to resuscitate her, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then
there was a lot of stimulation. They were bagging her, providing air support for her. I think the reason she was blue was because whenever they started the C-section, I remember them saying that she had inhaled amniotic fluid.
There wasn't hardly any in there, so that's a funny thing.
Well, she was still hooked up to you, though, too, so she was getting everything she needed from you.
Yeah.
But her lungs were not working the way they were supposed to. That was her biggest issue, was her lungs. And at 7 years old, that's still her biggest issue, is her lungs.
Yeah, so side note, Cassidy is about to be 7 this October, and she has asthma, is already diagnosed with asthma, and is on daily inhaler for her asthma. She has pretty, I would say, what do you think, semi-regular asthma attacks?
Yeah.
Even with her inhaler. Anytime she gets sick, it's the worst sickness. It lasts weeks instead of days.
She always had the worst ear infections that would settle in her lungs, too.
Yeah, yep.
And then she got RSV.
At 5 months. Okay, we're getting ahead of the story.
Yeah.
So we're in the NICU. Actually, what I remember was being looped up in recovery with my mom, because my mom came to help and brought clothes.
Yep. And you hadn't seen her for 3 days.
No, I did not get to see Cassie for 3 days.
You had the C-section, and I was the one that was running around the children's hospital delivering the milk that you were pumping back and forth between that
Yeah.
and you and pictures and
Yeah.
telling you that I changed the diaper first.
Yep. You
Yeah.
changed the diaper first. You did her bath first. You did all the stuff first. You did pictures first.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a really weird time, I guess, because I was still looped up for quite a little bit after the C-section, and because she was born at like 10 o'clock at night, we didn't even get to my room that we were going to stay in that night until like
about 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I had to pump.
And we didn't eat all day.
Because I was going to go in for surgery, which we didn't know I was going to have.
Yep.
So,
I didn't even eat. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there was no time.
I remember with the ladies up at the recovery floor, like, hey, you can have a sandwich that's in our refrigerator, and here's some other things that we've scrounged together, and they put on a fresh pot of coffee for us, too.
Yeah.
So, like, the nurses, I'm looking at these pictures, and this is one thing I've noticed between all NICU stays, all 3 of them that we've had. The nurses do a really good job.
Ugh, NICU nurses need more pay.
With what they're dealt with, because I'm looking at these cute pictures, and they've taken a teeny tiny hat, cut another baby's hat, and they've shoved it through to make a bow, and they do it with like all their little babies, and it's just they're doing with what they got, and they're trying to be cute and try to make your childbirth more happy, friendly. You know, it's not what you planned, but here's what we can do to make it better, and they do a really good job of that.
You know, after I was just thinking this too. After all 3 of them, also they all have their own like little name plates, because Cassie got that cute little elephant. And Carter got the unicorn, the Tiny Titans unicorn.
Yep.
And Colby got Stitch, purple glitter Stitch.
Yep. From Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah. Yeah, so they all kind of got their own cute little signs from the NICU. So, yeah, she started out on high flow oxygen. And then that's the next day, that picture. So then she went to low flow the next day, oxygen, which is important to Doug and I because Carter was on oxygen for a really long time. We will get to Carter's story in a few episodes here, but now we know what we're looking at a little bit better now that we're looking at Cassie's pictures. They don't look quite as scary. She looks like a bigger baby, honestly. She's not so tiny. So she was on high flow oxygen. She went to low flow oxygen. And that I remember this very vividly. Cassie's was always like something new every day. Like, okay, this is better. Okay, this is better. Oh, this is bad. Now we have to go back to that.
Yeah, we reset probably 3 times. I remember you thinking it was the worst.
Oh, I didn't think we were coming home.
And it was such a short, like, in comparative to some of our other NICU stays. I've said to you earlier that, like, this was easier, but it's still, you know, I've talked to a lot of parents, even in the NICU. I met a lady who was washing her hands and just crying at the sink before she went into the NICU. And she was telling me about her birth story and how crazy it was. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's terrible. And then she was like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm blubbering all over you. What's your story? And I'm like, oh, we've been here for over 200 days. And she just started crying. And I was like, no, it's fine. She's doing better.
It's like funny. It's like funny now.
Like we look at it and it's like, but other people are like, oh, why am I even crying? We've only been here for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, nobody plans to come to the NICU.
Yeah.
And nobody expected this. Everybody had a plan and it didn't go to plan. And there's a lot of hormones, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of fears that are involved in this. And this was our first go around with it. Yeah. So like the NG tube, the nasogastral tube in her nose was scary.
Yep.
And then we thought it was scary that, okay, they're like, well, she graduated from that. Now it's a OG, which is oral gastral tube. And then it's like, yeah, well, she's doing so much better.
So that's just a little tube that they feed her through either her nose or her mouth because gestationally, babies don't learn how to do some of the very natural things baby do, like eat a bottle, suck a nipple, things like that.
Suck, breathe, swallow.
Yeah, the suck, swallow, breathe reflex doesn't really kick in until like 36, 37 weeks. So she didn't ever really, that was a really hard thing for her to learn, was to take a bottle. So that was one of the main things that we had to worry about, because she also was sort of getting some milk in her lungs whenever she would suck, swallow, breathe, and try and take a bottle. So that was part of it too. So she was very stable for a NICU baby. There were some scary times where her oxygen went really low. She desatted. She had some heart hiccups here and there. All very
That
like
reset one of our clocks too, when we were trying to get ready to leave. Was she had a Brady event that reset it to where we had to wait 3 more days to leave. And I remember that being the end of the world that we. Well, it was, because it was.
No, it was for
3
us
more
at
days.
the time, because
3 more days.
3 more days in Chicago, and how many times is it going to be 3 more days?
Yeah, it happened
because
twice.
When you're in the NICU and you're like almost out, you're like, okay, I get to go home. I get to take my baby home. I'm going to take my baby home. And for me, you and I were country kids. We're not city kids. And we're in like, what was it, like the 14th floor, 12th floor in a skyscraper. And like the 10th floor of like hospital skyscrapers. And just like, you look out and there's just like people below you doing their regular life, which is just so unnerving. We're used to cornfields and bean fields and just highway as far as you can see. And so it kind of felt like, to me, it felt like everyone was in our business, and it was very weird. But we were actually super lucky because, we never had to share a room and things like that. It wasn't super busy with babies at the time we were at that hospital. So when she did move up to like the transition floor, we were in a room by ourselves, and that was also a very big deal for me too, was because also that was I was by myself when she transitioned from the NICU to the transition floor, and it like at Comer was transition floor just pediatric floor.
I don't know. It was massive.
It was a huge.
I remember it being divided up into 2 nurses per 8 baby in the big baby room area. And it was kind of set up to where the center island was where the nurses' stands were, where the sinks were, and then it was rooms around that center island where they were always had an ear or an eye on somebody. And with Cassie, you know, I mean, sometimes the rooms were at half capacity and they would hold 8. And so Cassie always had plenty of people wanting to come by and see her, nurses wise, because she was a big baby who was doing baby things, and they were excited about her.
Yeah, she took a
she's
binky.
easy. And then the other thing about the Chicago NICU stays that was like heartbreaking was the amount of babies that were there that didn't have anybody. And I remember we were talking about that, and it's like, oh man, if I could come back here and, you know now, like cuddlers
just
are
babies.
Such a huge point, like, for just snuggling babies that are just born into this world with nobody. And like, we never left Carter, or never left Cassie.
No, we never left Cassie in the NICU. I was there the whole time. We had her, and we came home one time to get gifts and things that we needed for her.
That was one
and
time.
That was almost mandated by the nurses.
Yeah, we needed to get out. We slept at home, and then we came right back.
Yeah, they were like, you need to leave. You need to go away now.
With Carter, we did have to rely on a lot of people who helped us.
Yeah.
Because that was 286 days in the NICU.
Yeah. I mean, in comparison now that we're doing, and this is the first time that Doug and I have talked about our girls' stories. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, is because we want to like go through it again. We want to like experience it, share the stories, and any other help that we can be to other NICU parents. But things change as you look at life through different lenses now.
When Cassidy was born, they weren't delivering anywhere 22-week babies.
No. And in Illinois, when Carter was born, it was still only 24 weeks that was written that they had to try to save. 22 was just like, they were basically being nice to us, basically.
Yeah, they said it worked out in Ohio before, so we'll try it here.
Yeah, but With Cassie, that wasn't the case. Really, once they got her out and got her resuscitated, most of the neonatologists were like, oh, she's a big baby. She's doing fine. There was a couple of hiccups here and there, but what they call it is just like routine preemie behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Preemie babies sort of act erratically routinely. They routinely act crazy. And so if you work in the NICU or you're anywhere close to the NICU floor, you just know that about preemie babies. They just, they're just going to have like a weird episode. They're just going to have like a weird blip, a weird thing.
The way nurses talk about the alarms is I found is very funny. That they start hollering at the alarms or
quiet down.
Yeah, like, why are you making this noise? Why you gonna
She's
be trouble
fine over
today?
there.
Yeah, ignore that one. It's like, are we sure? That sounds bad. It's like that alarm's messing up. And now you look at it and it's like, I don't know how many times we've had a lead or a heart monitor lead or an EKG lead that was on
She
one of our
kicked off
babies
something.
that all of a sudden is not reading right and you're watching it and you're like, oh, her heart stopped. And you're like, does the baby look in distress? No, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
And that you have to get over that, otherwise you'd just die.
They're living and dying by the beeps and the alarms.
You can't watch the monitors.
And that's one of the hardest things to learn too, because you want to. Yeah. You want to know, how is she doing? How is she doing? How is she doing?
For a reason, right?
Yeah, that was what I thought. And then also, I was very emotional because I was by myself, first time mom in the NICU in a big city, and I was beside myself. I didn't know what to do. I had actually quite a lot of visitors, I thought, for being so far away. We had a decent amount of people come to the hospital and want to say hi to us and say hi to the baby, and that was always great. My experience from the mom side of it was nighttime was the worst because I wanted to stay with Cassie. I wanted to stay in her room, but it just wouldn't work out with what they needed to do for her, for the night, for me, for pumping to get any amount of sleep. So I wanted to stay there. And there were some nights that I did stay and just sleep next to her bed. And I did all the things, the diaper changes. I did all the cares. Every so often, you just need to give your body a break, especially because I had a C-section. So there were nurses being like, leave now. You're going to give yourself a hemorrhage. Like, go sit, go don't do something. So, yeah, it's really hard kind of to be a mom. It's hard to be a mom or a dad in the NICU, like at any stage, because, this picture here, I know you can't see this picture. I will like try and post it somewhere so that you can see it. This is like one of my favorite pictures because Doug was working and he only had a couple weeks off, that he could stay with us. And I'm pretty sure it was like a week right after Cassie was born. And so we were in the NICU for 21 days. And so that's more than a week, obviously. And this picture is the first time that he came back from working and was able to see us that first weekend. It's such a sweet picture. It's just of Doug holding Cassie and like giving her kind of a hug. But like you can see like all the leads and wires and she looks so tiny. Doug's a very tall man. He's over 6 foot and he's like a big dude. So he just looks, it's a very precious picture and I like it. So there, October 20th. Oh, 21 days. So that's when we came home, was October 20th, and she was born on the 1st.
Yep.
So it was a long haul. Yeah.
Well, especially because that day didn't start out like we planned.
Right. Yeah.
And that's like what we're talking about with a lot of people who, even if you have a short NICU stay there, they're all just change of plans and they're all very hard.
Yeah. Well, and then the NICU is basically an emotional roller coaster anyway, because you don't know what to expect. You don't know when to expect it. And then weird things happen and people say that they're normal, but that's not normal for you because you've never experienced it before.
Yeah. I mean, just being under the Billy lights and stuff like that whenever she's turning Jonas. I remember she had to go a couple bouts at that. And I think Cassie spent the most time under the Billy lights.
She did.
For all our kids.
She did. Yep. They have all had unique experiences. But
she lost a pound too because she got down to just over 4 pounds. Whenever we were in the hospital, like the first 2 weeks, she lost a bunch of weight, which is normal for babies to lose weight when they first come out.
Right. And so Yeah, our NICU stay was with Cassie was kind of mild in comparison. Um, we did stay quite a little bit, and I will tell you, whenever I came home at the time, I felt like a NICU mom warrior. I was like, I can do anything, and like this was so difficult. This was so hard. It really was very hard. It was not
Yeah.
an easy thing to do at the time. When anytime you do the first thing, the first time you do anything, it's going to be difficult. But it was really difficult that first time. But when we brought her home, it was kind of just like a regular newborn baby coming home. She didn't really have issues until she got RSV when she was 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very regular, normal, run of the mill. We took her to my parents' house, which is a 4.5 hour drive, at 2 months old. So like we did the things with her. We took her out in places. Um, and then when she got RSV and then she started having, ear infections because she started teething right after that. So all of that is when we started realizing that being a preemie baby fed into those problems. And we'll talk about that more on other upcoming podcast episodes. But that basically is Cassidy's story. In a nutshell, Cassidy Jo was born at 32 weeks, gestation 2 days, via C-section on October 1st, 2017 at 9:54 p.m. And she was 5 pounds 6 ounces and 19 inches long. She is our very first tiny titan, and we love her very much. We learned a lot from her in that NICU stay, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Anything else you want to add to wrap it up?
I think we pretty well covered it all.
Like it? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on the Tiny Titans podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.